Name of the Mother, the Father, and the Morning Star. I'm Reverend Yuri M, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by Rob Ryder, author of the Little Key to the True Grimoire, published by Hadean Press. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rob. It's really exciting to have you on. I really enjoyed it, and I'm very, very excited to discuss it with you.
Thank you so much, Yuri. Yeah, it's really exciting to talk to you. Really exciting to be on your channel. Really exciting to have this pamphlet out. It's my first one. So, yeah, lovely.
Can you, for people who might not know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background about you and like what led you to write this particular booklet?
Sure. I'm one of those people that's been kind of like casually involved in magic and the occult for, as long as I can remember, fascinated as a kid. Um, and I think, I kind of was very wayward for a long time. I was a party animal. I used to squat. I used to run events. I used to, be wild. And eventually I realized I couldn't keep that going. And magic is really one of the things that saved me. As I started getting rid of the kind of less healthy stuff in my life, magic it gave me a core, it gave me a center, something to focus on, and it's become my life. It's become like what I do now. So I've been focusing much more seriously for the last 10 years. I spent some time in the OTO. I spent some time in a Golden Dawn, independent Golden Dawn order. Um, and eventually I did the Abramelin process, which I completed 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In that time, I've written a blog. There were a couple of articles that I wrote. People really responded to. The first was an article on the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which is like probably the most universal right out there. But people really liked. I think I tried to break it down quite simply, and that was really encouraging. So I kept writing the blog. And what happens when you start contributing to the dialogue with magic is you start getting responses from people that you never thought would pay attention to you. And so I'm very privileged to know some like incredible magicians, the people who've been my heroes, in some cases for 10, 15, 20 years. One of those people is Jake Stratton Kent. After Abramelin, I kind of felt like I'd done the big god stuff. I got my big initiation. I got my cop badge. The gods started showing up for me. These incredible experiences that I'd been hoping for my whole life started happening. But afterwards, I felt like I've always been more. It seems silly to me to go all the way up through the sort of hypothetical spheres, past the stars, all the way up to God, and then come back down here with stuff from there to make the magic happen. I feel like there's so much that's already down here. It can be a lot more efficient, and one of the ways to do that is to work with what we would call sublunar or chthonic spirits. And in European tradition, for the last 1,000 years or so, we've called them demons. So I started trying to figure out how to work with demons, and Jake's the man for that. He's very direct. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in quite a close knit community, you and I think that Jake is one of the really influential voices that brings that community together. He's not really there, but his work is there, I think, for all of us.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So he was very clear about you don't need to the god stuff. Wherever you stand, he's quite against the transcendental models. I use different models. I try and approach spirits through their own culture, right? So if I'm dealing with angels, I'm going to go through sort of more Solomonic method. If I'm dealing with demons, I really want to understand how to treat these spirits with respect. So I don't use my Abramelin stuff. I don't wave my cop badge, like a lot of the Solomon guys are. I don't wear a big llama, and I don't compel and command and bind and all that kind of stuff. But Jake, he's outlined a cosmology that makes sense, and he's outlined if you take the time to dig through his work, he's outlined a working method, and that's epitomized by his Encyclopedia Goetia. It's 5 volumes. The first of which is the True Grimoire. Got 2 books in the middle, the Geosophia 1 and 2, which are his explanation and his exploration of a sort of a chthonic sublunar model an earth, Sophia, earth wisdom, the wisdom of the earth and the spirits that come with that. And at the end, he deals with a lot of Cyprianic stuff. And I know that he's worked the GV, which the True Grimoire is a new sort of recension of, for pushing 40 years, you know, longer than that, I think, longer than I've been alive. He understands it in a way that very few people understand any of this literature, and it's hard literature to read and hard to work with.
So it's so fragmented all over the place. So
yeah, and I think one of the things that we do is when we go, oh, I don't understand something in one text, we start looking around at other texts, and sometimes that's illuminating, and sometimes that's just really confusing. Because
it really is.
Hundreds of years apart, they can come from slightly different sort of cultures and cosmologies. What Jake does is in the True Grimoire, he gives you one that a reading of the Grimoire Verum that is complete. You can work it, and it's really rare to find a grimoire that you can pick it up and work it here.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Like, I remember when I was a teenager, just first starting this out. You know, Jake hadn't released the True Grimoire yet, obviously, because you know this is in the early 2000s. But the Grimoire Verum was one of the first grimoires I picked up after mastering witchcraft and like Necronomicon. Everybody's first books. And
of course, that's
I remember being really intrigued by it, but at the same time, you know, it's one of the older editions, so it's really fragmented and incomplete. And Jake's done so much work at like bringing together all those different versions of creating a complete cosmology and working system of it. I mean, I really like your booklet because you along behind that, and then you help from with your own experience or illuminate that process. Even makes it even more clear. Because I mean, I've started to work more with Jake's method, the Black School Cyprian, and for that, you know, I was very tempted to begin to work with the Verum spirits, but then I don't know, it just didn't feel right, and so you know, I ended up making one of the Cyprianic books my book for that, and then keeping the True Grimoire separate. But yeah, like the sacrificial knife, I've always been very, very intrigued by that. I thought it was for maybe making the parchment the sacrifice of the lamb. You described it as the way to actually harvest the wounds, which I thought was very intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, what Jake does is he kind of gives you an understanding of like why that stuff is there. I'm you know, I say I'm vegan. I do cheat. And when I cheat, it's like eggs and cheese. I was a chef for a long time. It's just kind of like built into me to create this stuff. But there are things that I'm kind of uncomfortable with in terms of slaughter, for example. What Jake does, because he makes a lot of suggestions about how you can appropriately work that. When we look at the paper in the True Grimoire, you know, you get this long process of how to prepare the paper, from slaughtering the goat to skinning it, to sort of drying it, and then liming it, and, you know, going skinning. You have to make all of these separate implements to do it. And then at the end, it says, like in all the other grimoires, it says if you can't do that, just get some paper and bless it. And so, you know, really anything between those two is acceptable.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion over 2 years study of this text, developing, trying to understand how to work it. I've made some of the tools like 4 or 5 times. And as my understanding about this is spirit magic, right? And all of the magic that interests me is spirit magic. And so the way that works is through relationships. If you're not going to bind and compel and threaten, then it works through relationships. And I really think that the making of the tools and the process towards the conjuration is how you build those relationships. So he makes a suggestion that if you're not going to slaughter a goat, because a lot of us, it would be very just like practically difficult even to sort of find a goat, and let alone the sort of revulsion that we have as modernists. I've never slaughtered anything in my life.
Exactly. When that book was written, that was common for people, but nowadays it's not. So
yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think we look at this stuff and we think, oh, maybe it's about the sort of horror, and maybe it's about the transgression. Actually, this stuff was just a lot more normal.
Precisely, yeah.
Really abnormal for someone not to have been around the slaughter of an animal, you know, 700 or 800 years ago in Europe.
Precisely. It's even like when you find grimoires that call for human fat, like that was an ingredient you could get at the apothecary back in that time. So,
you know, and I've been to Morocco a few times, and in Marrakesh they've got the big marketplace, the Joma there, and they've got the witch market section in there, and like a lot of those ingredients are there, you know, like and all the stuff that you think, maybe it's code for another stuff. No, man. If you go to cultures where this sort of magic is still living, like those ingredients are available. You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine there was probably quite. You got a dead body and you need to process it. If you can get profit out of that by rendering the fat, like,
and you probably will. That's fair,
I'm not here for that. So,
no,
I took
but
Jake's
yeah,
advice.
it's not like mummy medicine, at least. So that one's a little bit more disturbing.
I mean, a lot of my favorite spells are the really gory ones, you know. But so I have to find these ways to work around, and the paper is really like epitomizes that. The process that I did is effectively the one that I've got in the pamphlet. It's based on Jake's advice, you know. So what I did was I bought some very nice linen paper. I rolled it up. I bound it with some blessed thread, and I had goat horns. I've still got some. I've got them all hanging around. I make things for people sometimes. So I stuck a horn in each end of this bundle of paper. I gave it a ritual baptism. I named it this goat. I fed it every day for a week with holy water, with some incense, and I spoke to it and I made sure it was happy and it sat on my altar. And at the end of the week, I slaughtered it with my sacrificial knife that I'd made. And then I went through the process almost exactly as if it was a goat in less time than it would take with the skin. I spent a day on each stage of the process. It was 3 days. And instead of using lime in the liming pot, I just used some of the salt that we blessed for it and sprinkling holy water on it. But I treated it at least magically, at least symbolically, but I think magically, as a living creature. When we see the consecrations in the grimoires, we're treating everything as a living creature. Arise, creature of paper. Arise, creature of clay. You know. So I treated it with that respect, and I did it all in a ritual process. I actually did this during my 3-day purification, which purification is required in effect. So it gave me a focus during that, because purifications can be intensely boring.
Oh yeah.
So having a 3-day paper making process to do during that was really, really handy. And then that meant that I had this paper that rather than just sprinkling it with some water and smoking it, which is a legitimate and very serious kind of magical operation, it had that much more in it. And I know that the more I engaged with the text, the more that I tried to repeat the processes. The ritual is a language, as far as I'm concerned, and that's a language by which we speak to the spirits. And it's my opinion that it's a language that we've learned from the spirits. So when I want to develop a relationship with the spirits, I need to learn that language. That's part of me showing them respect and earning their attention and their consideration. Is one of the phrases you get in Grimoire. I need to deserve their attention and their consideration. So I think the tool making, I spent 2 years working on X before doing my final conjuration.
Oh wow, that's quite a time period.
I did the final conjurations in the week that I submitted the pamphlet to Hadean, and then shortly after the final conjurations, I heard that they'd accepted it. We went through the edits, and it came out. So it came out last Tuesday. I did the conjurations in the moon before this one. So about 5 weeks ago, depending on how quickly you edit this, I guess. So very recent, but it was 2 years of work. I've studied other grimoires. I work with the Solomonic stuff. I think that the thing about the GV, it seems like it's a very reduced system, but I think that's because we're looking backwards and we're used to these big heavy texts like the Key of Solomon. When you compare different versions, you see that the core tools, the stuff that repeat throughout Solomonic tradition, they're all here. And there's some tools that it's not clear in Solomonic text what you're supposed to do with them. The Elder Rod, it's there in the Key of Solomon, and they just kind of go, oh, also get one of these and put the same sigils on it as you do for the Hazel. Nobody knows what to do with it. In the GV and the True Grimoire, it's explicit. You're told what hand to hold these in. You're told which spirits they work with. And then with a little bit of research that Jake has done for us very kindly, we can find out who those spirits are and therefore what these tools are for. So there's nothing wasted in the True Grimoire, and there's nothing unclear in the True Grimoire. Everything that's in there has a function, and you use it in your rituals. When you're going through the Key of Solomon, there's like tools that they have you make that they never tell you what to do. In the GV, it's all clear. It's an amazing text. And Jake's done this, following in the shoes of Joe Peterson, of course, who is just, one of the greatest gifts that we have at this time in Magic. The work that he's done alongside people like David Rankin, Stephen Skinner, and I have to give just so much props to Joe Peterson and Twilight Grotto, Esoteric Archives, his website, where there's so much resource just sitting there for free out of the kindness of his heart for us. So I've worked between his edition of the Grimoire in Verum, which is probably the one you started with, and Jake's much more recent TG. Now, as far as I understand, Joseph Peterson is not a magician.
Yeah, I believe he is.
He's an absolute expert on these texts. Jake is a working magician, so there's differences and discrepancies between the texts, and in those cases I've tended to Jake's choice because he's done it.
Precisely, yeah.
And as I went through the process, I started to see the sense in that. There's some confusion about what they call the first character, whether that should be a Laman like in Solomonic tradition. But when we use Jake's circle, we have those protective symbols around the circle. So the Laman, I think, is effectively a kind of pact that you make with Lucifer. I've had a working relationship with Lucifer since way before I knew what I was doing in Magic. And he's always been very kind to me. I think for those of us that are writers, creative, Lucifer loves that, and he's very generous in his attention to that. And I've found that as I've rekindled that relationship more formally through my magical work, he's been so generous with me. And the chiefs, and particularly Scaling, the intermediary in this system, they're so present in my life, and they give me little threads that I can follow to find what I need. They give me solutions to the problems that we face. Where I've gone through in this pamphlet, and I've gone, here is a sort of a step-by-step way to approach something very close to Jake's method that he lays out in the TG. I didn't do it exactly like that myself when it came to it. When you engage with this stuff, you're making creative decisions. So you need to know how to make those decisions and why. And your first recourse has to be to the spirits. And if I was going to say anything about anybody getting into this kind of work, getting into Goetia, getting into work in a Luciferian model, which, we're both members of the ELU, we're both very, very attached to these gods, they're incredible. I think that the first thing that you want to do is you look at the prayer for success, the Astrakios prayer in the TG, and you just do that. And since I made that prayer part of my daily practice, I do it 4 times a day, whether I'm preparing for magic or not. But my life has just lit up.
It really does change so much when you incorporate that prayer into your daily practice. That's one of my daily prayers as well. Do like a Libra Resh kind of thing with salutation to the whichever kings it is, for dawn, on at sunset, etc., and then do the Aspirational prayer afterwards. And it's really amazing what those 2 little things can do for your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I do it alongside Resh. And to be honest, everybody's discipline flickers. I think we as magicians, we could be a lot more honest about the sort of give and take, the inhale and exhale, the times when we're really disciplined and we have all the energy for it, and the times when we just can't, At the bare minimum that I ever do is I do Astrakios 4 times a day. When I'm on top of my practice, I'm doing offerings, I might spend an hour a day every morning in the temple. But the bare minimum, I do Astrakios every day. If I'm doing Astrakios and Resh every day, my life is easy, Things move along. I mean, it's not easy. There's challenges, but I can take it, and they give you the clues, they give you the solutions, they help you find the people that can help you. They make the books fall out of the sky, You have to do the work. You have to earn it. It's that relationship. It's what we give to the spirits we get back. I think that it's very easy to look at this stuff because we come from a textual tradition. And it seems very obscure and it seems very weird, and we start practicing it and it maybe doesn't feel like it's doing anything. We feel like we're just dressing up in silly clothes and making toys. It's all a bit ridiculous. There's a point. I had this idea that when we start with magic, it's an aspiration. We want to do this. And then from the aspiration, we start doing the work. And I think at that point, it's like a seduction, right? We're slowly we're courting these spirits and asking them clothes. So we move from the aspiration into this seduction. And then we get to the point where we've built the relationship, and they're not being coy and flirtatious with us anymore. They'll show up to the date, and at that point we enter into a relationship, and everything changes. At that point the spirits are living with you. I knew that I needed a temple to do my conjurations. My life has been chaotic forever. And I knew that in order for me to be able to be disciplined, I needed the support of a space that I wasn't constantly flipping backwards and forwards between it being my bedroom and being a temple. And I said to them, guys, if I'm going to do this properly, I need a temple. They ruined my life for a week. I thought I was having a break, and I went crazy. At the end of that week, everything had just moved so rapidly around me that I had this temple. And now, this is where I'm sitting now. You can't see very much of it, and I like it that way, but I'm sitting in there now, and I walk in here, and my posture changes, how it feels to be me changes. And when I leave empowered. That's before I've even lit a candle. That's before I've called spirit. As you just have to be earnest. We're seducing these spirits, we're calling them to us, and we're asking them to build this relationship with us, exactly as we would with people. It's a lot harder because it's harder to see them, it's harder to hear them. We have different affinities, but they come, and you can be a massive arsehole about it, and you can stand there with your weapons going, in the name of a god that you don't like I demand that you come here. Or you can just be like, they talk about this in some of the old grimoires. They talk about this in the grimoires. They talk about the difference between the magicians and the witches. And they'll say, I think this shows up in a lot of the Cyprianic literature, they'll say stuff like, the magicians, they do all of this kind of stuff. They use the circles. They use the witches, they just show up and party. I think that those of us that consider us to be Goetic magicians, we're sorcerers who work directly with these spirits, who consider us to be working in the sublunar level, we need to have that mentality of the witches. We are equal creatures of the earth beneath the moon. We're not superior. And I think for me, I have a patchy sort of personal history, right? We've all kind of grown in our lives, and I look around, and we are a disgusting animal at least half the time, right? Half the time we are beautiful, creative, wonderful, holy creatures, but half the time we are a disgusting animal. The idea that we can claim moral superiority and claim authority based on that against the gods of the rivers and the trees that we're hurting is absurd. I have to. The authority that I earn through my work is the authority to stand there with them, the authority to get access to the office. It's not the authority to run the company. It's very important to me to keep that. So that comes from being humble for these spirits. I think that there's a real tendency in Western magic to be arrogant before the spirits. And you know what? There isn't a lot of living Western magic. That life is coming back into our tradition now after a long break. And that's coming back because we need the spirits. And a lot of us are starting to realize that we need to treat our planet and our environment with the respect that comes from understanding that we are part of a spiritual ecosystem. This sort of colonial attitude to dominating the spirits, I think has landed us in a lot of trouble. So I think the TG, for those of us with that mindset, trying to get into a system where the spirits aren't necessarily going to give us the time of day, it gives us a way of using the ritual language to speak to them without having to rely on bullying them. And I feel very strongly about that.
I agree very much with you. That's one of the things that really drew me to the Grimoire Empire, is that it's much more friendly to the spirits, and you're not threatening them, and it's all about building up this relationship with them. I also really like the kind of subtle animist current to it. When you're calling on these creatures assault or or other inanimate objects, we're recognizing the fact that it's a spirit, that they have spirits, and I would say that's what really drew me into the work, is the spirit friendliness and then that not so subtle animist undercurrent. Sure, it has the Judeo-Christian window dressing on it, but that's the culture of its time period. And even then, like, you can still kind of, trace that stuff back to certain beliefs even involving this. The transcendental aspect obviously isn't there, but you don't get that in the Grimoire environment. So.
But that stuff is all there. I went by the book when I did my first conjurations. So I made Lucifer and Beelzebub and Astaroth sit through a full mass in front of me. They were very kind and gracious about that. By now they know me quite well and they know that it's respectful. I know that I have a lot of friends who are on the sort of demonology side of things, who find that quite difficult. There is a sort of a very understandable issue with Christophobia, and I think I've reflected some of that in my ideas, and that there is a culture there that's difficult. Jake, as you say, in the rest of his Encyclopedia Goetica, he explains that a lot of this tradition comes to us from older European sources, particularly Greek and Proto-Greek culture. So I started to try and think like what's the function of the Christian stuff, right? And I came down to effectively one thing. What the Christian stuff does is it allows us to one way or another purify and consecrate. It gives us like a big mains boost to plug into. I think of it as effectively solar. So it's like plugging into that solar battery, and we can use that to purify stuff. If you analyze the process in a book like the TG, you only really use that up until the point that the spirit show up. At that point, you're not really mentioning God anymore. So it occurs to me that there is a real function to the Christian syncretism, right? It gives us a way it gives us a mystical practice for ourselves. It gives us a way to purify ourselves. It gives us a way to purify our tools. It gives us a way to make things sacred so that they are good enough for the spirits to be around, to inhabit, to touch. Now, you don't have to do that. I wanted to go by the book because I think, for me, I think that when we're trying to recreate these processes, the first thing you do is you try and duplicate the processes written down to duplicate the results. Once you've done that and you know it works, then you can start tinkering, right? And I know that other people have done this work before me. I wanted to do it for myself. But so I did these first conjurations. I made them sit through the mass. Everything was kind of, the holy water was done with names of God. For my own practice, I don't use Trinitarian names. I restrict it to certain names that show up in the PGM, like Adonai, Eo, Sabaoth. These are names that are throughout magic, and they seem to be less offensive than to these spirits than Trinitarian names or overtly Christian stuff. This is a problem that a lot of people are trying to solve. ELU, Mal and Michael and yourself and the wonderful people who are kind of progressing that church have done an amazing job of building a sort of modern syncretism between Christian technology and Luciferian stuff. I'm a member. I did the ELU self-dedication rite. It's one of the most beautiful and intense magical experiences I've had in my life. I did it twice because it was so good. It takes a surprising amount of times.
Does it?
Yeah. It looks so easy. And
so
you're just finding. And you go through these stages. I went through the same thing with Abramelin. You start off excited. You get into the middle of these Abramelins. I did the 6-month version. Some people do 18. That's a long time to be preparing for a ritual. In the ELU, right, several hours of just plaiting this thread. Messed it up the first time because I hadn't considered the practicalities of how we do it because it looks so simple on paper, right?
Precisely, yeah.
One of the things that you learn once you've done a few of these things is you learn how to spot who's just talking from reading books and who's done it. Because when you've done it, a lot of things just like click. A lot of things that seem like they're really obscure, you're like, well, that's just literally practical. Like, it seems like a really weird choice until you do it and you're like, yeah, of course I need to hold it in this hand, or but you have to go through these processes of like rejecting it, like, oh, this is boring, it's frustrating, and just get all that out of your system so that then you're ready to have the experience. I feel like a lot of magic is like kind of putting things on top of yourself and building stuff up. The stuff that really works for me, I'm very focused on the purifications. It's about stripping yourself away getting rid of all the stuff that's in the way of us having this beautiful, pure, very childlike experience of a living spiritual world. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to do something very long, very boring, and very repetitive until your mind gives up.
It's
We have
true.
to
I mean,
trick
it's
ourselves.
the magic to the rosary. I mean,
Yeah, right.
so
Yeah, right. And the magic of repeating prayers every day. And there's days when you just feel like, oh, I'm doing it again. And then there's days where, or periods of weeks and months where it will build up and build up and build up. And then it goes away again and then it comes back, you know? That's the dance. And that's the mystery.
it is. It's like some days you can really feel your practice, and other days it just feels like you're phoning it in, but you can still tell it's working, but it's just you're not as plugged into it, I guess. So
yeah. The other thing is very often the results are, it's exactly, you look back and it's like, well, yeah, they said that was going to happen, but I had this very like science fiction fantasy way of thinking about what was going to happen. When it happens, it's just much more mundane very often than you expected. You know, the analogy that I always use for that is like in the run up, I'm old enough to have been a teenager in the run up to 2000, and I was there with all the sort of like the conspiracy stuff and the fantasies about what was going to happen when we moved into this new kind of consciousness and everybody was connected and we'd be able to communicate instantly from mind to mind. And you know, it feels like it didn't happen. It happened. That's what we're doing now. I can access information. I can speak to people anywhere on earth. I can speak to the leading lights in the traditions that I'm interested in almost momentarily. We had that expansion of consciousness. It just wasn't the way we thought it was going to happen. You know, magic very much works like that for me. I get now, having done enough of the work, having put myself through enough of the initiations, having for whatever reason earned the grace and the attention and consideration of the spirits, like I get the results, but they're never quite the fantasy.
It's always in a very strange. Well, it's like when you try to explain synchronicities to someone else that you in your life, you try to explain them. And they like have so much meaning. They seem so strange to you, but about it to someone else, and it just seems boring, mundane, like whatever thing. So no, I can definitely jive with that. Like,
I mean, there are those insane experiences.
Oh, there are for sure, but then a lot of the time it's like, oh, I expected, fireworks, and instead, like, I got what I want, but through this like seemingly unrelated channel. Which you got what you want, so who cares if it doesn't show up fireworks?
And I mean, you do. You have the manifestation. You see the spirits, you hear them, you talk to them. But a lot of that is because you've starved yourself for a long period. You've repeated mantras. You've stressed your brain. Ramsey Jukes talks about this quite a lot, and he has a video on YouTube about Abramelin that's worth watching, where he's talking about an article in Psychology Today about how to create what they call a sensed apparition experience. So when people are, trapped on a sinking boat and they suddenly see a vision of their holy guardian angel who tells them how to get out of there. But I imagine we both had these experiences where maybe it's mundane problems, but we just get a sequence of instructions like popping into our brain. Oh, you remember you've got that thing over there, go and grab that, and then you'll need that thing there. Okay, now like fold it like this, and oh, you've made it. And it's like, well, I could have figured that out, but I had no idea. It just came to me. That's the spirit.
Precisely. Yeah.
A lot of stuff happens in dreams. I'm not, like psychic particularly. I don't have. It's changing and it's growing, and since building relationship, particularly with my HGA and then Skilling, they do a lot of this for me, and I'm getting more aware. But it's hard for me, so I have to use pendulums, or I often use a tarot deck. I feel very comfortable with my tarot deck, so that's a great way to communicate. A lot of it now happens in dreams. So then I just have to wake up, write it down, and then verify it by my experience, But there comes points. I remember the most significant first one for me was Boone came to me in a dream and just told me, "This is how you summon me," and he gave me a completely unprecedented ritual. But I woke up, I wrote it down, I went and got the stuff. To get a red plate, get 5 red candles, write this symbol on it, like do it at this time, and I did it, and it worked, and the results came through. Now I wanted, like most people who contacted Boone, I wanted to be able to get enough money to pay a few months' rent, and he made it happen. He made it happen in a way that was quite inconvenient for me, but he made it happen. I had to jump through some hoops to get it, but he made it happen, and that opportunity wasn't there before. I think going into magic with too many expectations can lead to a lot of disappointment. Thing to do is to approach it knowing that you want to have these experiences, follow the instructions, keep the processes, be honest and be earnest, and just spend that time calling the spirits day by day, and your understanding grows from building those relationships.
And that's probably the best beginner advice I've heard in quite some time.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point of my book, right? What I want to do, my book, my tiny little pamphlet. It's I'll do the plug. It's £3 from Hadean Press. Please buy it from their website. They ship all over the world. You can get a digital edition for £1.50. It's tiny. You will need either the GV by Joseph Peterson or Jake's True Grimoire. I really recommend getting both because I haven't put prayers and stuff in there. What I've done is I've broken it down. When you go through these grimoires, the information is scattered all around because they didn't have editors and they weren't writing for publication anyway. And Jake's put in 40 years of his experience. So you need to absorb that stuff. But when it comes to the practical work, I've put it in order. I've told you what page the prayers are on. I've told you what page the symbols are on. Where there are difficult decisions to make, I've told you how I made those decisions. And hopefully it's a really strong leaping off point. That bit between knowing that you want to do it and figuring out how to work a grimoire just feels like such an expanse. And I really hope that what I've done with this is I've managed to kind of like build a little bridge there just so that people can get to doing the work. A lot of people will spend years and years studying, wanting to understand it all before they start working. You never will.
Exactly.
Just start the work. Just start the work. Start doing things that bring the spirits to you. At the end of the day, they're the ones that teach us. Every grimoire takes you up to the point where you meet the spirits. And then you have your spells and stuff, but they don't tell you what to do then, because from that point on, and this is explicit in Abramelin as well, from that point on, the spirits will teach you. So, get to that point as quickly as possible.
Precisely, yeah.
I waited until I was in my 30s. Don't get there as quickly as possible, because the older you are, the more you're going to have to adapt, the more you're going to have to unlearn.
Indeed, that's very, very true. Like I didn't get back into. I mean, I've been an on and off dabbler, I guess, for most of my life, and I was very serious as a teenager. But then, moved down to New Orleans at 18, and Katrina happened, and I'm in New Orleans, so it's like I'm young, free from my parents, and stuff kind of slid to the side until I got into my mid to late 20s, and then I started picking it up again. I really wish that I hadn't taken that break, because not only further in my practice, but be more developed as well. So, start young. If you're young and thinking about it, start today. Don't and it's not to say you can't have fun, but it is work. And if you approach it like that, it's very rewarding in the end, even when it's boring and tedious in the middle part, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Start today. Start with something manageable like the True Grimoire. There will always be obstacles. There will always be things in the way. We're trying to move the world. Right? There's going to be a lot of friction. There'll always be excuses. It will never be perfect. Just start small. Start with making your first tool. Start with getting that daily practice of calling the spirits going, and build up and snowball. And you'll find over time the obstacles will just start to clear out of your way. But it's all about that first step, and it's all about that first step. Just take it. We're very lucky, Yuri, that we're watching the sort of spirit cult community that I think we've always dreamed about happen right now. It's so exciting. The GB spirits and the GB is a big part of that. These spirits, the world needs them and we need them, and they need people like us to serve it. What's happening with this community at the moment is so vibrant and it's so exciting. And I'm really privileged just to be one of the amazing voices that, and to be around people like yourself, people like Mal, people like Jake, people like BJ Swain, who's phenomenal. Stian, for example, the daddy, I love him very, very much. Michael Lux, who you had on quite recently. These are amazing minds. My priests and my spiritual community, these are people who I feel so privileged to be able to contribute to their work. I feel so privileged that they're contributing to my work. We all have different focuses and different skills. And there's all of this new blood coming up, all of this energy and all of this excitement. And we are recreating a tradition right now. It's coming to life right now in front of us, and it's just mind blowing. And I just want people, you know what, we have to make a lot of offerings to the spirits, and my primary offering that I make is bringing more people to them. You know, it's been the most exciting, most wonderful, rejuvenating thing in my life, and I want people to have that experience. So anything that I can do, I'm always there saying that if you're stuck, if you don't know, if you have questions, if you just feel like you need someone to give you permission, or if people are being mean on the internet and telling you shouldn't be doing it, just don't listen. Come over here, come and see Yuri, come and see me, come and see Steen. You know, come and find us in a couple of it's the Goetia and Grimoire group on Facebook. Come and have the chats. Just send us messages. We're really, really approachable. We love this, and we want you to love it too. That's really it, right?
It is. It's true. Like, I love when people come to me with questions. It's one thing, like, you know, some people have weird questions where it's like this, but then like for like honest, like genuine newbie questions, I love those. Because, you know, I remember being in that and like looking at these books and being bewildered by the sheer amount of like options and how do you know which one to pick, and like, I mean, those are obviously kind of personal questions. I've definitely been trying to, when people talk to me, like when I'm on Orlee's channel, I'm always recommending Jake's work and the Rev Yuri M. It's like, in my mind, I think that's kind of like the pinnacle where we're at right now in Jake's work, and from there we only have upward and outward to grow. But you know, we all need to kind of learn these traditions and get to work with these spirits and the way we've worked with for so long. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked your little booklet, is that you really lay out the process and go into really good detail and not the motivations behind, but the why you do certain things. And I really like that, you know, you describe it as the tool building, as that like initial relationship building experience. Because I mean, their sigils go all over all the tools. So clearly, they're the ones that are granting their power to these tools.
We're all noobs, right? Even we think, I think I'm so smart now. You know, I've got a certain amount of experience and a certain amount of understanding. Like, these spirits have been around so long that we're all children in front of them. So I think what I love about the Goetia movement at the moment, the community that's really sort of lighting up around it, is that we're equals. I might have been doing it 20 years longer than someone. I might have been focused on a particular text for longer than someone. But those new questions, man, they catch me by surprise all of the time, and I learn from them. I learn from people coming up, and as much as it's just a dialogue, and really it's a wave. And at the moment, you know, I might be near kind of the top or the front of the wave. 2 years ago, I wasn't. You know, in 5 years' time, I might not be. It's crashing and it's rolling, and so we just need those voices to keep coming. And we just need to keep pushing it forward. We need to be open-minded. We need to remember that the spirits point, and just be as kind of open to listening to them, to comparing experiences with each other, and just try and wake these gods up. You know, I used to be involved in chaos magic. There was this thing about re-enchanting the world. The world has always been enchanted. It's us that we need to re-enchant. This work is how you do that.
Very true. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rob. For anyone who would like to get a hold of you, is there any particular way you would prefer to do that?
I'm approachable on Facebook, Rob Ryder, or I have robryderhill.wordpress. Not sure which. Rob Ryder, you can always message me through there. There's a Patreon, but nothing is charged. I don't write enough blogs. They come out every now and then. But, you know, there are ways to get hold of me. As I say, Goetia and Grimoire Magic is the forum that we're all kind of focused around. But I'm also in Goetia's study group. There's a Rev Yuri M study group. There's a True Grimoire study group. I'm in the Solomonic forums. I'm absolutely not the only one. Come and find Yuri. Look up the ELU. You tell me how it's pronounced.
ELU, yeah, or Ecclesia Lucis et Umbre.
There you go. ELU, Church of Light and Shadow.
Luxembourg.
Come and join around. There's so many different approaches as well. And in this community, we're never going to tell you anything is wrong. We're just going to tell you what we do and see if that helps.
Precisely.
Yeah, just say hello. Get involved.
Excellent. I'll have a link to your Oh, thank you, Rob. I'll put a link to your blog in the description below, as well with a link to the Hadean Press site where they can purchase your new book. I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to see what kind of impact this makes on the developing spirit work living tradition that we're developing and that you've helped to contribute to. So thank you for your contribution. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button below. Make sure to subscribe. Until next time, peace.